This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second generation with the Odyssey and the Atari 2600 all the way up to Gen 7 with the Xbox 360 and the PS3. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the Polymega Retro System. And this is based off a listener of ours who commented on one of my episodes. He wanted to hear more about the Polymega system. I don't know, actually. I don't know the username, but yeah, they wanted to hear more about the Polymega system, and I love talking about this system. So thanks for the suggestion. I really appreciate it, and I'm always available for questions and episode suggestions. If you join the Discord community, if you follow me on Patreon, I'll talk more about the Patreon subscriber perks later. And then also, obviously, you can comment on Spotify, or you could send me a message over any of my socials. So it's the Polymega system. It's a pretty controversial system, despite a lot of the many great things it can do as far as playing your old retro games, from its price to customer support. So despite all that, for many that have one, it's an amazing system to have that puts many of your retro systems into literally just one package, from NES and Atari all the way up to PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn. We'll talk about specs, price, peripherals, the modules, and some of the swirling controversy around the system. All right, let's get started. Retro XP is part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, so be sure to check out patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast to check out every show the network has and get access to the exclusive community Discord. There's a room I have in there called Retro XP where we have a lot of discussions on retro games, and that's also a good place to throw up some comments and throw up some ideas for future episodes. I know there's one particular user on the Discord, the Retro XP Discord, that wants me to talk about the Infamous series. I promise you, I have that in the works. I'm actually kind of going back and forth and playing Infamous 1 and 2 because I want the episodes to focus on those two games. Great games. And I promise that's coming out. So if you're listening to this and this is you, Tony, I'm working on it. Promise you. There is a 30-day free trial available if you want to try the patreon.com /Hair of the Dogcast site out. Otherwise, you can follow me on X, Threads, Instagram, and YouTube at RetroX Podcast. You can comment on any one of my posts there and kind of let me know what you're thinking, what you want me to talk about. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. So for starters, Polymega was formed by a company, Playmaji. Originally started out as Retroblocks back in 2017. And they're a Los Angeles-based company founded by Brian Bernal and Eric Christensen. They were both former employees at Insomniac Games, and I think a lot of other people that joined the company had some experience there as well as Blue Point Games. Blue Point Games, RIP, brought us the great Shadow of the Colossus remaster, or remake, I should say, for the PS4. Bernal himself was inspired to create the console after taking a trip to Japan in 2015. While he was there, he purchased numerous PC Engine games, but was actually disappointed in the number of console modifications needed to make them run on a modern HD television. And I think that's the problem when we made the jump from CRT TVs to modern HD 4K TVs. The old retro stuff just doesn't play that well. He sought to create a modernized console capable of playing such games without the need for modifications. The console was initially set to release in early 2018, pretty ambitious, although it faced several delays. The console was announced in January of that year as the Retroblocks. In May of 2017, the console was renamed the Polymega. I don't know why, like poly, maybe multi, I guess. While Retroblocks Incorporated, which was the name of the company, would become Playmaji Incorporated. Development of the console continued quietly over the next year before it was shown at E3 2018. You guys remember E3? I do. Kind of miss E3 sometimes. Anyway, Playmaji started taking pre-orders in September 2018, but the console's official website went offline for several days following high traffic. Obviously, this was a very sought-after system at the time, and a denial of service attack. There's always some dissenters out there. The hardware design phase was finished actually in early 2019, although the console's release was expected to be impacted by a supply shortage of 14nm chips. This is kind of around the time when we started to see this chip shortage. A public beta test phase began in early 2020, and the console's full release would be further delayed to November of that same year due to third-party production issues. An overseas partner responsible for manufacturing printed circuit boards used in the console closed in mid-2020. The release was delayed again after a communication issue arose with Walmart following a personnel change. Originally, the idea was, besides the website, you could pre-order, on the main website, or you could buy straight from Walmart and pre-order from Walmart. Initially, the plan was to have Walmart as a major distributor of the system, but that fell through, of course. As a result, Playmaji canceled pre-orders made through Walmart's website and just urged buyers to purchase the console through the Polymega website instead, with the release delayed to February of 2021 for those who pre-ordered in 2018 and 2019. Another fork in the road for Playmaji was that the consoles were going to be assembled in Myanmar, and protests were taking place there. Major protests that disrupted a lot of the local economy there in 2021. I want to say there was almost like a regime change at the time, if I remember. This caused another delay in the release. Also, 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic was also a factor. The console was eventually released worldwide on September 12, 2021, fulfilling pre-orders made prior to May 2020. Some units arrived in Japan a day early around this time. The console retailed at this time for $450, while Elemental modules, which were plugins which support cartridge-based games, talk about that later, they retailed for about $80 at this time. And I ordered my Polymega base unit in early 2020, I remember. And of course, I was part of the first wave of shipments in the following year in 2021, so I had to wait a whole year and a half to get mine. And I didn't know it at the time. I think when I pre-ordered it earlier that year, they were like, yeah, it's supposed to be coming out this year. And then I think a lot of people at the time, especially early 2020, I think we underestimated the impact that the COVID-19 virus would have on the literal global supply chain and everybody else's lives. So, I mean, over these last 4 or 5 years, Polymega was off to a rough start. But company stayed firm in doing what they could, and they believed in their message. So I gotta give them kudos for that. So for starters, the base unit is literally the mother brain of the whole system. As far as specs go, it has an Intel Coffee Lake S series processor, 2 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM memory, a Realtek Wi-Fi Bluetooth combo module. It's RTL8822BE. I don't know what those numbers mean, but if you know, you know. An HDMI 1.4, which outputs at a max of 1080p resolution. Gigabit Ethernet, so you can plug directly into the port. 2 USB 2.0 ports. A 32 gigabyte nano SSD for storage with an expansion slot that fits an M2 2280 SSD. An additional micro SD XC port on the back, and this port is great if you want to upload ROM hacks and other files into your games. Talk more about that later. And the main driver of this system, which is an 8 times speed CD DVD slot-in optical disk drive. This is the brains, basically the workhorse of the whole system. As far as the operating system goes, the Polymega utilizes Linux as its main operating system, a lot more friendly to use as opposed to Windows-based platforms. The Steam Deck works really well with a Linux-based operating system and is emulation-based, and it uses legally licensed software such as Kegafusion, MAME, Mednafen, and Messen, all modified personally by Playmaji to work on the Polymega. And these emulation software programs actually can be downloaded as is on your PC if you want to make your own kind of emulator system. There's tons of YouTube tutorials on how to do this. So if this is something that you're interested in about kind of going with an emulation route on a PC, definitely there's tons of options there for you. And I'll have a future episode where I actually talk about one specific software that I use for my arcade emulation is Launchbox. But like I said, future episode. But Playmaji obviously configured these themselves to fit their system. And the major issue, some don't see this as an issue. I don't see this as an issue. Some may say that if you cannot upload ROMs into the system like you would on a PC or any emulation system like the ones you find on AliExpress or Temu and the millions of handheld emulators out there. The system only works to play physical media, and then you have the ability to rip that game directly onto the system. A CD drive is built into the main console, like I said, while cartridge-based games are supported through add-ons known as element modules, which plug into the base unit. The base unit has a few games on it pre-installed from various systems like the NES, Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, and so on. I want to say some of them are kind of like Japanese or import copies of the games, but they're still playable, especially if you buy the system and you don't have any retro games to play at the time. The user interface is actually pretty intuitive, not flashy like modern consoles or even like Steam Big Mode or anything like that. The database Playmaji uses for their Polymega is their own proprietary database. They're not using anything like Games Database or anything. And they're pretty well curated too. I think their website says they support 90% of all or most retro kind of games out there. They do support some homebrew games and some kind of repro games. I know I talked about, I think I talked about how I bought Terranigma, a reproduction copy of Terranigma for the SNES, and it actually works on my Polymega. No issues there. Yeah, you can search for games through their database. You can even make your own wish list right on the console. You can curate playlists and even search for games you downloaded on the system, especially if you downloaded a lot and you don't want to scroll through the lists. Just, you can type it in with your controller. And yeah, so the other big thing, like I said, you can install your games fully onto the system. So you don't have to hunt for the physical copy every time you want to play the game. You don't have to install the game, but for many, it's a great quality of life feature if you bounce back and forth between games and systems. This is also very good because one of the systems you can play is Neo Geo CD. And the Neo Geo CD I know is notorious for having very long load times. And I would say playing Neo Geo CD games on the Polymega cuts down those loading times probably more than half. So it may be beneficial to install games on the system, and especially in that case. You can also upload ROM hacks or additional files onto the system as well. So, for example, say, me, what I did, you buy Police Knots for the Sega Saturn and you don't speak Japanese. Some great people out there made an English translation patch for this game that puts English captions and text into the game that are actually translated really well. And to the point where it's not broken, it's actually completely understandable. Well translated, like I said. You can download the file off the internet. You can load it onto an SD card and then use that SD card on your Polymega. I want to say, I think there's the main website is Police Knots translation. If you type that in, there's kind of like a main website that you could download the patch straight from the website. So it's not, this isn't, I'm not telling you to download. Always be careful when you're downloading things off of shady sites, but this one's official, the one I, downloaded. When you start the game, you may be prompted to load a file if you choose. All you got to do is select the file itself, and then the Polymega does the work for you. I had the Super Famicom version of Chrono Trigger for the longest time, and I bought it for $25 compared to the over $250 required for the US version. There was a patch that I found where it didn't translate the game to English. It basically converted the version of the game from Japanese to the US version. Uploaded the patch, and basically the Polymega interpreted the game that I was playing as the US version of Chrono Trigger, all in English. Yeah, everything. I don't know how, there are English translation patches, and I've tried some of them. Some of them didn't work. Or some of them were just kind of glitchy that actually glitched the game. There was some patches that I uploaded that broke the game at the title screen. So it's okay, all right, well, this patch that I used on the Polymega just worked perfectly. So there are tons of different kinds of ROM hacks, and I've had great luck going to romhacking.net if you're interested in finding all sorts of hacks, translation patches, other kind of patches. So there's options out there. You can also create save states on the system. So if you could go the route of writing down passwords and using the internal save features on the games if you want, like PlayStation and Sega Saturn game. The PlayStation, obviously, you needed a memory card, but you can just save the data straight onto the system itself. Another nice bonus is cheat codes. The Polymega has an internal Game Genie and Game Shark database for games, so on the fly you could either manually input the codes from your old Game Genie or Game Sharks and Pro Action Replays. I want to say Pro Action Replays mostly on the PlayStation, or you could select them from the internal database. So you can, fire up Infinite Lives, Invincibility, or any other manner of cheat codes for these games on a whim. So yeah, if you have your old Game Genie or Game Shark books and manuals, you can definitely just put those codes in and it works just as well. Like I said, some of them work, some of them don't. Some of them kind of break the game. But you got to kind of, play around with it. You can also utilize the many display features on the system. Most of these, systems are pretty commonplace across all emulators. You can incorporate scan lines, curving monitor displays. You can even throw up old school filters like Game Boy screen filters for whatever reason, and Virtual Boy filters where it just turns the screen red. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but go for it. You can throw up 16:9 display functions or play them as they were originally intended with a 4:3 display. The Polymega upscales well, actually. If you want to play in 16:9, that's up to you, really. A lot of times, like the old Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, they don't translate well if you play 16:9. But the Polymega does actually some pretty good hardware functionality where it just doesn't stretch the screen and actually, I mean, I don't know what the technical term is for it, but it actually kind of modifies the screen to look good and look resolution-wise matching in 16:9. However, I don't play it that way. I play it as, in native 4:3 format. They don't have bezels on the sides. It's just straight black screen. So I know sometimes that annoys people of just like, you want the screen to be fully covering the whole screen as opposed to just taking up like half or maybe like a third or 2/3 of the screen. But to me, I don't care about that. If you don't care about that, then, fine. But if you do, there's the 16:9 option that you can try out. So what do you get with the Polymega base unit if you can buy it? Currently on their website, it's listed as sold out. And unfortunately, it has been for well over a year. I would say almost 2 years. I've gone to this website every so often just to kind of check out of curiosity. And I'm like, oh, yep, still sold out. The base unit right now is currently $549, and it comes with a wireless controller that connects via a Bluetooth dongle you plug into it. And the wireless controller is shaped similarly to a PlayStation 4 controller, and it's actually a pretty nice controller. It also comes with a power supply unit, an HDMI video cable, and a dust cover that slides onto the front of the console that's just right above the CD-ROM drive. The base unit doesn't really look like much. I mean, it ain't going to win any design awards. It's shaped like a square, pretty much. But it's light and smaller in size compared to your standard modern system like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. And if I could compare it to any retro system out there, kind of in size, I guess I would maybe like a Sega Saturn, kind of similar. The Sega Saturn's, I think, a little bit smaller, but I would say it kind of looks, I don't know, that's not even the right way of doing it because obviously the Sega Saturn has a pop-up disc drive, whereas this one is just a sliding, one, just like a normal CD player in a car, if you have a CD player in your car. Maybe, like I said, it's not winning any style points, and the dust cover I mentioned has no hardware in it. It's pretty much like an empty box. It's just a plastic box that just slides on top of the system to cover the kind of like the connection port that sits on top of the screen. And this is where, like I said, those element modules come into play. Out of the box with the base unit, you can play a wide range of CD-based games, which is pretty revolutionary compared to what you get mostly now. I know you get a lot of emulators out there that can play CD-based games, but this one is probably one of the only ones that can natively do it with the actual disc drive. So you can play PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, Sega CD, 32X CD, Neo Geo CD, TurboGrafx 16, PC Engine CD, Super CD-ROM, and Arcade CD-ROM. The last two are extensions for the SNES and PC Engine, respectively. Of course, they're Japanese exclusives. We never got a Super NES CD-ROM, even though that was maybe part of the plan for it. For each system I listed, you can play the American versions as well as the PAL and Japanese versions, so it's pretty much region-free. The element modules take the place of the dust cover that comes with the base unit, and the available modules that you can get right now are the Power module, which plays NES games, which includes Famicom and PAL versions. The Super module, which plays SNES games, Super Nintendo games, as well as Super Famicom and PAL. The Mega module, which plays Genesis, as well as PAL, Mega Drive, and 32X games, which is kind of cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't play Mega Drive games, which I think is, are like Master System games, which I think is a missed opportunity, but whatever. You got the Turbo module, which plays TurboGrafx 16 and PC Engine games. The Ultra module, which came out, I want to say recently, maybe a year or two ago, which plays N64 games and PAL Japanese games. And the Pro, which plays Atari 2600 all the way up to the 7800. And each module comes with its own proprietary controller that emulates the original's controller. The neat thing about these modules is that the controller ports that are on these modules mimic the OG console ports. So not only can you use the Polymega proprietary controller that comes with these modules, comes with a 6-foot cord, which is kind of nice, but you can also plug in your original controllers as well. And honestly, the controllers that Polymega makes are well made and about as close to the originals as you can get. I have the Power, I have the Mega, and I have the Super modules. And the Ultra module is, quote, on its way, supposedly. It says Q2 of 2026, so hopefully soon. I ordered it in November of 2025, but I want to say with the advent of the analog 3D that came out last year, there was probably a demand for N64 modules of any kind. So people were probably like, hey, Polymega has a N64 module. Maybe I should buy that. So maybe there was a rush to get it, but I kind of probably missed the boat on that. But regardless, like I said, you have a choice of what controller you want to use. You can even use the wireless modern controller if you're a heathen. Can't imagine playing a Nintendo game with a modern PlayStation 4 style controller. But the nice thing of actually, the one gripe I've always had about the Nintendo controller, the original NES controller, and this is probably was never a factor for me when I was a kid growing up with the small hands that I had. But now playing on an original NES controller, those sharp corners, man. I know I'm probably bitching like a little girl, like a little boy, whatever, but the points on those controllers, especially sometimes when you're playing a high stress game and you're gripping the controller hard, man, those corners dig. But this one has this Polymega NES controller has rounded edges, so much more comfortable to hold and a little bit bigger than the OG controller. So, but like I said, if you like playing on the old controllers, which 80% of the time I do, you have options. You can also use, I think, I have a Super Nintendo Power something. I have I have a third-party Super Nintendo controller that I always used when I was growing up, and it was like clear. It was a clear case, so it was really cool to look at. I still have it, and I still use it to this day, which is kind of nice. One other notable peripheral that you can get with the system is the GC01, or the light gun for the Polymega that works on modern HD TVs. It's got patented Sinden technology, which is older than what we have now, but not by much really, maybe just a couple years older than the modern kind of AI webcam system that we have. This gun has a small webcam in the front lens that targets shootable objects on screen. Unlike the invisible lasers that the older light guns had, this gun works for any light gun game that the system supports, down to NES up to the Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1. And I talked about this gun in a previous episode. I got it in my hands earlier this year in 2026. And yeah, I played a bunch of games on it. So if you want to know more about this light gun, you can listen to my previous episode titled Polymega Light Gun Hands-On. If you haven't listened to it, I totally recommend. Of course, I recommend all my episodes. So a while back, earlier adopters like me, 2020s, 2021s, Remember the announcement of this digital storefront on the Polymega that would allow for users to purchase retro games direct from the system itself. And there was supposed to be like a phone app that you can even access your library, not necessarily play your library, but you can access it, look at it. You can probably add things to your wish list on this library. But as of this recording, the project is missing in action. So I don't know if they still have any plans for this or if they just kind of shelved it and said, well, we're just not going to talk about it anymore. I don't know. What they've done instead is released CD physical copies of games for various systems in the form of what they call collections. And right now there are 18 collections. And then, it's like volume 16, volume 18, whatever. There are 18 collections to choose from. And the latest one is called Rival Turf Collection. In this collection, like for example, it includes SNES versions of Rival Turf, Brawl Brothers, Peacekeepers, Tough Enough, and arcade versions of Ninja Kazan and Daraku Tenshi, The Fallen Angels. There are others that include A Boy and His Blob for the NES, Gunbird for the arcades. I think that's relatively new. Bases Loaded and Goal for the NES, Bad Dudes for the NES and arcade, Asteroids for the arcade. I think there's a big compendium of a bunch of Atari games. I mean, there's so many more. And all these collections individually cost $40, and they all contain little books, instruction manuals on how to play a lot of these games. And some of them contain more games than others in them. Some of these collections have 2 games in them. Some of these collections have 8. So it's kind of a matter of how you value these games to yourself. And if you think $40 is worth it. So in some cases, it's cheaper to do it this way than buying the original copies if they're even available. So kind of talking about all this, sounds like an awesome system. Everything sounds great. Everything is, you have so many options to play different retro games. So many options all in one place. Obviously, like it's talked about before, you can emulate on the PC all you want. On any handheld system, you can run your Steam Deck to do it. You can run your, you can buy one of those little 50,000 games in one Temu little boards, plug it into your TV, fine, you can do that. But native hardware where you can actually play the physical games, this is, on paper, this sounds amazing. And I'll go over my personal experience with what I've had with this company and what I've had with this system. Pretty much it's like almost 5 years, 5-year lifespan now. So like I said, I got the base unit in late 2021 and I waited over a year for it when I ordered it. I ordered it in early 2020. I think I remember I was keeping an eye on it, and then I think I got word it was like, well, there's a lot of pre-orders for this, and I got kind of worried. I was like, well, what if they sell out? So I just, pre-ordered it with no date in sight, but I was like, hey, at least I have it locked down. And this came out of the box great. And initially the wireless controller it came with was a different version, and it had these connection issues. Like sometimes I'd be playing the game and the connection would drop suddenly. And the quality of it the physical quality of it was good, but obviously it could have been better. And the wireless controller is the only controller you can use to play CD-ROM games, I would say, for the most part. And like I said, they made a newer version, version 2 of this wireless controller, which is what I talked about earlier. It's kind of PS4 styled controller. Still has a dongle that you have to plug into. The other one did too, but there are a list of controllers that are compatible on the website, and there is a Reddit thread on the Polymega subreddit that outlines controllers that are known to work. Like the original wired Xbox 360 controller, interestingly enough. I just found this out when I was researching it. I was like, oh, that's cool. Me personally, I just use the standard controllers. I've plugged in the original controllers for all the modules I've had most of the time. Actually, I don't use the Sega Genesis one. Due to the fact that these controller cords are pretty short. These are like 3 feet long, and I don't sit 3 feet from my TV. So I basically use the Polymega proprietary Genesis controller. And actually, another thing I researched when I was researching this episode, I did find out that the 8BitDo M30 controller works for the Sega Genesis games. So actually, I may pull mine out and try that soon. I have to find it. I don't know where I put it, but it's got to be somewhere here. And obviously the dongles can, I think the dongle for that one is a Sega Genesis port, so that's pretty cool. Everything works great when you use the proprietary controllers, the native controllers. No issues with connectivity or malfunction with the controllers. They plug right in. I will say, though, that the Sega Genesis port on the module feels a little loose when you plug in any controller. Like, you plug it into the port and it just feels like it doesn't sink in. It doesn't like feel firm or anything, but they stay in place as long as you don't play like a maniac and pull on the cables or anything like that. But inserting discs works great. It's just like a CD player. You know, you just slide the game right in. So sometimes I just love the old disc trays. You know, you pop open the tray, you put the disc down, and you slam it shut. I mean, I've said this in a past episode that the Sega Saturn disc tray is probably my favorite disc tray of all time because of the open button. You hit the open button and it makes this really satisfying click. Tell me you know what I'm talking about. Please tell me. However, actually, going back to the Polymega, I had this weird glitch with my base unit when I got it. The discs wouldn't eject when I hit the eject button. There's a tiny little eject button that's on the side of it, kind of similar to what a PS5 and Xbox, modern systems have. If I wanted to eject the disc, I had to go into the system menu and select eject in order to remove the disc. I mean, it was a minor inconvenience. I was like, whatever, it's not that big a deal, I guess. I lived with it up until actually I ended up, I would say less than a year later, I ended up buying modules for this thing. I bought the NES and I think I bought a Sega Genesis to start with. No, I bought all three, I think, at the same time. I did actually forget to mention the price of the Element modules. They can range from $80 to $90. $80 for, I think, the NES up to the Genesis, $90 for the Ultra module, and $120 for the Atari module. With that price is wild considering the system it is. It plays Atari games, and you're paying $120 for it. That's just crazy to me. When I got my modules, they were actually not recognized by the base unit. I would, take the dust cover off, slap the module on, connect it. No games were recognized. The system itself, the base unit itself, couldn't even recognize that a module was installed. You can go to the system settings, and then it showcases like, hey, what module is plugged in, and it showed no module plugged in, which is weird. I cleaned there's like a port, kind of like a board port that the modules plug into. I tried cleaning that. I tried everything. Nothing worked. I emailed customer support on a whim. I was like, hey, none of my modules worked. I sent pictures of everything. They actually got back to me in a couple of days to address my issue. They just said, hey, send the base unit in. We'll take care of it. There is a 1-year warranty on the system. So I sent the base unit back to them, and they turned around and fixed it within a month and sent it back to me. I mean, I don't know if they actually took my same unit, fixed it, and sent the same unit back to me. Obviously, they told me, they warned me, they said they'd have to clean my hard drive. So if I had anything saved on there to try to kind of transfer it to a different, save system, or, just kind of eat the cost, I didn't have anything important saved. I had games installed on it. So I was like, that's no big deal. I can just reinstall them. Like I said, I can't confirm if they sent me the same exact system or not, or if they send me a refurbished model, for all I know. I didn't really look at the serial number on the system when it came back. I was just more impressed at how quickly it turned around. Like I said, for me, I would say about a month, a little over a month that this happened from the time I emailed them to the time I got my system sent back to me. I think that's pretty good, honestly. Granted, the company's based in LA, it's based in America, so I'm not like sending it overseas or anything like that. And everything came back fully working. Modules worked. They even fixed my disk eject issue, which I didn't tell them about. So I guess now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm saying this out loud, it's led me to believe they probably just sent me a refurbished model. Unless they saw it not working and were like, hey, let's just fix this while we're here. Anyway, since then, the systems work great 4 years later. And I use this thing a lot. It does a lot of heavy lifting for me. I did have sound skipping issues for my SNES years ago that were very noticeable. And it was borderline annoying to the point where I just couldn't ignore it. It would just skip like every minute or so. And it was actually a widely known issue. A lot of people I heard online were experiencing the same thing. And it was fixed with a firmware update and just works great now. No skipping issues, nothing. system does have regular firmware updates every now and then, so I'd be sure to check in to make sure you're running the latest firmware. So you go to settings, you go to firmware update, I think in there, then it checks to let you know like, hey, you're running the latest firmware, so long as you connect to Wi-Fi on your system. I didn't install an additional SSD drive in the system. I think this can take up to 2 to 4 megabytes or terabytes. Yeah, maybe. I think maybe 2. I think 2 is the limit. 2 terabytes SSD drive. If you can find one that's affordable right now, I hear SSD drives are very expensive. So maybe it's not a good time to buy this. But most games I play don't take up a whole ton of space. Like the cart-based games, they're kilobytes, if anything. I install CD-ROM games mostly, and they take a few minutes to install fully, usually. The nice thing is you don't have to do online updates with this stuff. You don't have to like download a 20 gigabyte update file. You just install the game and it's ready to go. And obviously these take up more space, more like megabit size. And I haven't felt like I needed to expand my hard drive space quite yet. I mean, half the time I just run the game off the disc or cartridge, which isn't that big a deal for me. If anything, I don't think there's much of a difference between loading straight from the SSD drive that's already installed on there to running it straight from the disc, because there's load times with all these games. Cartridge-based games, not so much, but obviously CD-ROM games, there's going to be load times no matter what. I think maybe you're going to save a couple seconds, if that, but to me, that's not, I don't know, to me, it's not big a deal. I have my games easily accessible on a shelf, so it's not like it's hard for me to access my physical games. It's probably different for some people that, especially like if you borrow a game from someone, you install it on your hard drive or whatever on the Polymega itself, take the game back to your buddy and be like, okay, thanks. That's all I needed. So that would be a nice option for people who want to just install games, especially if you're just borrowing the game from someone just for a hot minute. But overall, it's a great system. The cheat codes can get a little finicky if you stack on too many, I've noticed. And some cheat codes just don't work out right. So it's a bit of trial and error with those. And I think I talked about this earlier. I noticed some cheat codes, if you use them, can actually break a game even. So be careful, like to the point where it renders the game unplayable. And honestly, that's how it was back then too. Technically, these games weren't designed to be hacked with cheat software like Game Genies and Pro Action Replays. So you're playing games as unintended as they should be. So for me, this is my go-to retro system for NES, SNES, and Genesis due to the small form factor. I mean, 3 systems in one I have pretty much. 4, 11 technically. I utilize the PlayStation 1 every so often. I do have my PlayStation 2 hooked up to my TV, so I mostly use that for PlayStation 1 games. I also use my Sega Saturn mostly. I have that hooked up to my TV as well. But I've used the Polymega for a lot of my games, as a lot of those games on the PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn as well, just to use it basically. Speaking of those, another thing I didn't mention is that you can actually install different BIOS files for your CD-ROM based systems. And BIOS is basically the kind of like I guess the software that actually enables your system, whatever you're running on, to run the games itself. So you have to find a way to rip there's the conventional way of ripping the BIOS file directly from the hardware itself if you have the capabilities to do that. 99% of us probably don't. So there's a way you can find the BIOS file. I'm pretty sure, you use that big brain of yours and you can, find out where you can find these BIOS files. So you can install a BIOS file for the PlayStation onto the system storage or, right through your SD card. And the system will actually, if you boot up a game, it will find that BIOS file first to fire up the game instead of using the one that's already installed on the Polymega itself. For example, like if you upload, I think, SCPH 1000 or whatever, I forget what it was, or onto your Polymega, the opening PlayStation screen plays in all that sweet glory before the game fires up. You know what I'm talking about. Probably one of the best system intro openings out of any system. I will die on that hill. The Polymega natively doesn't do that, which I think is almost kind of a missed opportunity, but I guess I don't know if they were allowed to do that, display the Sony logo or anything. And this also works for the Sega Saturn. I mean, that had a pretty cool intro as well. Not as good as the PlayStation one, but despite the hardware issues I had, the company did right by me there, and they do support the system with regular firmware updates and such to bring new features and bug fixes and everything. So granted, it's not like every other month or anything, but I want to say over its 5-year lifespan, they've addressed a lot of the kind of bugs and issues that they've had up until this point. So it's a pretty well-run system right now. Altogether perfect though, with everything? Absolutely not. And in this case, I would really temper your expectations for this company because let's be real, there is no system out there that does what the Polymega does. We've got tons of emulator systems out there that play ROM files. You've got your PC, handheld that can do it as well as your phone, tablets. You could even hack old retro consoles too. There's communities out there that are hacking Wii's and hacking Xboxes to play retro games. But to play native carts and CDs, like you have the Nintendo carts on, obviously you can run it on old hardware, but you want new hardware that can play nice with your HDTV? No one does that. No company does that except Hyperkin's Retron 5 and a bunch of other different cartridge-based ones that I think Axis makes a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of obviously kind of shady, cheap companies that could run this stuff. But to this effect, to be able to run especially CD-ROM games, no one else is really doing this. The Retron 5 runs it the best, I would say, I would recommend, but they only play cartridge-based games. And I had that one for a long while, but I actually sold it when I got into my Polymega. The nice thing that the Retron 5 had is that you can actually play Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games on it. The Polymega can't do that. Playmaji, they're not a big company by any means. Atari became a minority investor in 2023, which with the extra income that Atari was pushing, would help push this base unit production to help with the large pre-orders on their website and obviously the interest, as well as producing the Pro module that came out pretty recently. As of now, there is no timeline for when the base units will come back up for sale. And many to this day, have pre-ordered the base unit up until 2 years ago and still haven't received it. Still sitting there waiting with crickets from the company. And, you can blame many things on why. Slow production and shipments. Tariffs, obviously a big major source nowadays of problems. The chip shortages we've experienced in the past. And, of course, money. Playmaji, despite the support from Atari, is not swimming in money. They're not a Microsoft. They're not a Sony. They're not, they're not a Google or anything like that. The base unit, since its initial release, jumped almost $100 to $150 in price during its time, which, like I said earlier, the base unit is $550. When you think about it for pound value, the base unit can play up to 8 systems from this disk drive alone, and it's region free. So your available library, if you can find the games on your own, is quite vast. It plays tons of different platforms. And what ticks off a lot of people is just the lack of transparency and openness, regular openness with its customer base. They're not hugely active on social media and such, speaking to their customers and how productions are going, future updates to hardware, firmware. When we do hear from them, it's like big news. It's like big drops. And that can be seen as a good or bad thing because you don't want to overpromise to your customers. You don't want to keep leaving them breadcrumbs. You want to tell them stuff that is meaningful. So I guess I can understand this sort of communication to say, hey, if we've got nothing to say, we're just not going to say anything. And I can respect that. When I would say the longest I've waited was like 2 years for my light gun. I waited for any sort of news about my light gun from them. And I remember receiving an email randomly from them late last year wanting to confirm my address due to the impending shipment of my light gun pre-order. So I got really excited. And I remember the subreddit blew up in excitement with these emails. When these emails came out, I remember. The website itself does minor updates to estimated shipment projections. Everything on the website that you can buy now, with the exception of the base unit, and most are actually available to ship right now. And as of this recording, you can buy the power unit, the power module, the super module, the mega, and the turbo modules. They're ready to ship right now, as is their respective controllers. You can buy the controllers individually on your own and the Ultra controller as well for the Nintendo 64, the universal wireless controller you can buy separately, and the light gun itself. There is a tab on top of the website. If you go to the website and it says there's a tab that says status, which shows the shipment statuses of all their stuff, most of their stuff, I would say. Besides the base unit, which right now is showing $550, there is an option for the deluxe bundle, which arguably is the best bang for your buck if it were available. This retails for like $800 if you get the base unit as well as the power, super, mega, and turbo bundles. That's a pretty damn good deal, especially since these bundles are like between $80 to $90. Like I said, this was if it were available. So unfortunately, the only place to buy this base unit as of this recording is in the off chance you find it at a retro game store or eBay. I see one on eBay right now looking. They're selling it for $1,000, and it includes the base unit, the Ultra module, as well as a few of the collection games, which is kind of cool. There's another here listed with 3 days left on auction for $840, and it includes the base unit, Mega Module, and the Ultra Module. And looking at past sold items, it looks like they're selling for around average $800. Just the base unit only, box, controller, everything. Bundles with all the modules can go anywhere between like $1,500 and $3,000. Man, $3,000. Jeez. These don't pop up regularly on eBay. So if you're die hard wanting one and have the money to spend, you got to be checking in daily, I feel. That is wild. The game store I go to, Game Together down here in Milwaukee, someone came in and traded in a bunch of the sealed stuff, and I freaked out because I was like, holy crap, that's mega. Basically, I think all the modules, including the Ultra module, the base unit, and I think a couple extra controllers. And he didn't want to sell them all individually. He felt it's better to just sell it all in a bundle. And I think he was selling it for $2,200. I haven't checked with him. I don't know if he sold it yet because it was on display at the store for a while, and then all of a sudden it was gone. So I don't know if someone came in and scooped it up. But yeah, so if you see it out in the wild, it may be worth picking up. If you see it on eBay, try your luck bidding. Like I said, it sounds like you're going to be spending about $800. So it's tough if you want one right now. I totally get it. It's tough. Is it a great value? Absolutely. $800 in value? Me personally, I don't think so. I mean, there's this enticing part of emulating on your PC, and it's sometimes can be too great to justify a purchase like this, on top of just getting the original systems by themselves and maybe an HD TV upscaler being cheaper than just $800. But then again, the base unit plays a bunch of disc-based systems: PlayStation, Sega Saturn, PC Engine, Neo Geo CD. I mean, Neo Geo CD itself is probably worth more than $800. I haven't looked it up, but I mean, buying each individual system to play these games will be pricey. I mean, this is a tough decision. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to spend your money, though. I mean, if you want it and you're willing to spend money for it, by all means, go for it. I'm not your financial planner. I'm also not in your head to know what it is that you really want. This is something that you really want, a lot of times people will spend the extra money just to have it. You know, you can't just walk into a Best Buy and find this system there. You can't just walk into a GameStop or even a retro game store and just see it sitting there like most, systems nowadays. I mean, the retro space is riddled with overpriced hardware and software that could be borderline asinine. I mean, PlayStation just announced that they're increasing the price of their PlayStation 5s by $100. Xbox did it twice last year. There's a rumor that Nintendo Switch 2 is going to have to increase their price. So, I mean, $800 for a retro system I don't know. Like I said, I mean, in some cases, you'd be crazy to spend 3 or 4 times original value for a lot of this stuff. Yet here we are as retro game collectors doing just that. I just know it's not going to be easy as just heading over to the website and clicking buy. The company's, I've said this before, the company's lack of transparency and openness with its customers is kind of infuriating, in my opinion. Not for myself, because to me, I'm doing just fine. What I got, but for new customers that want to buy your product, and even customers that want to know what the future holds for your company, the lack of communication is just hard to keep faith in. Is Playmaji going to survive? Are they going to keep the promises made? I mean, one such promise that they've made on their website is the potential for firmware updates to the base unit that would allow it to play Dreamcast, 3DO games, CDI games, and even new modules like a Game Boy module. That'd be pretty cool. They said as much in their FAQ section that they're looking to support these systems. And also they did say as much that there won't be any support for anything in Gen 6, like the PS2 and further on, like the Wii, GameCube, PS3, Xbox, whatever. So have we heard anything about recently about extended plans beyond that? Nope. They are pushing out these collections, the CD game collections that I talked about earlier, which requires the company Playmaji to obtain licenses to be able to sell them. So there is obviously a monetary investment that they have to shell out in order to get the ability to sell these games, which is actually pretty nice because many of these games are actually unable to be purchased by conventional means, even in secondhand stores. I talked about some of these games are actually arcade versions of games. So, you could try to hunt for, the arcade cabinets if that's something that you're interested in. So the rhetoric around the company can actually be kind of annoying to listen to. When I was on, I don't go on Facebook that much, but I was on a couple Polymega Facebook groups that just, a lot of people voicing frustration with the company, and I get it, and obviously I'm on the Polymega subreddit, not knocking them at all, but I can understand the frustration. Some dissenters are just, coming out proclaiming that Playmaji will be going bankrupt. They'll be closing its doors. We haven't heard anything from a while, so they're probably done, or they're probably wrapping, going to be closing its doors soon. They're turning away from their customers soon, so there's all the promises that they're making, and they're not going to fulfill them at all. Some of us are a little bit more optimistic, but the impatience with the availability of the base unit is really, really driving away potential customers and making even your current customers lose faith, especially since we talk about how great the base unit is. So people are like, oh, I want one. Oh no, I can't go get one. Oh no, I have to overpay to get one. At the very least, if Playmaji wants to stay relevant and stay a big player in the modern retro space, if you call it that, they need to address the availability of the base unit, which is basically the mother brain of its entire ecosystem. Yeah, they have stuff on their website. You can buy them. You can buy a majority of the modules right now, get it shipped to you in a couple of days. Great. But the base unit, nothing runs without the base unit there. It's a great system. I love it. I love owning one. I love playing on it. The fact that I can play so many of my retro games is amazing on one place. I don't have to swap back and forth between like hooking up all my old systems. I have a ton of systems hooked up to my TV already. I don't really want to add more. I know there's purists out there that say if you're going to play these old games, you have to play it on native hardware just to keep the purity of it. But for me, as far as ease of, I don't have a big space to hook things up. I'm not one of those big YouTubers that has 30 acres of basements or 3,000 square feet of basement space, to hook up all these systems. That'd be nice one day, but for the setup I have right now, the fact that I have a Polymega that can play 10 systems, 12 systems now with the setup that I have, it's great. But I actually feel for those that want one, especially if you're listening to this episode and you tell yourself at the end, hey man, I really want one of these. I feel for you for if you want one and you don't want to pay secondhand sellers and overpay for that matter. So if I sold you on this product, I'm really sorry. There is time to turn things around as far as Playmaji goes. Me personally, I would love an opportunity to talk to anyone at Playmaji about the hardware, about your plans and even a little bit of your history. So if anybody at Playmaji is listening to me, which would be awesome, hit me up. But transparency is key to keeping your customers, both current and future, happy. I know I don't need to tell anyone that, most of all them, because I'm sure they're reading all the comments, they're seeing all the posts and tags about them on social media, they're watching all the videos, they're listening to all the podcasts talking about us, I'm sure. It's got to be frustrating. I got to imagine for them to get things done at work and build your brand, all the while dealing with the multitude of factors that many of us consumers have no idea about. The current economic climate can't help matters much, as well as business factors that can affect hardware manufacturing, shipping, especially since this is an international company. They're shipping in different countries. They're sourcing materials and sourcing builds, to other countries and stuff. So there's a lot of, organization. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of collaboration with other players, other customers, other businesses and stuff. And so that's a side of the business that we have no idea about how it works. It's easy for a company like Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo to just put this up because they handle everything in-house. Companies like Playmaji, companies like Analog, companies like Ambernick, little different story. And, I would say especially with a newer company like Playmaji that's trying to promise a lot. Let's admit it. They are giving us a lot and trying to do it in the best way possible. It's got to be hard. Like I said, we have no idea what it's like to run a business like this. And so I feel for him in that case, but also it's like, we give you money, we expect things. So that's kind of like the role as a customer. We pay a lot of money, especially disposable income's tight nowadays, but we also want to support these companies that are giving us the ability to play retro games. They brought us the product that works well, does what we want it to do, and then some, and continues to slowly improve and provide us with more. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the future of Playmaji and the Polymega, and I'm really hoping we get that Dreamcast update. Okay, here's an interesting update. As of today, I'm recording this segment on April 15th, 2026. And I recorded the episode that you were just listening to before today, and it was supposed to be released. And of course, on their main website, I think I just went to the main website just on a whim. And I was, when I was kind of like ready to post this episode, and then all of a sudden they're like, major update from Polymega. And I was like, of course there's a major update a day before I release this podcast. Now, what is the timing of this is so crazy. I didn't mean to do this, but it's just still wild to me that it's like, I literally the day before this episode is supposed to post, all of a sudden this update comes out. So I delayed the posting of this by a day just so I can get this section in. They put out a blog post with some major updates about the company, and I'm just going to read the blog post in its entirety. Hi, everyone. We have a fresh round of Polymega updates to share. And first one is about the Polymega base unit shipping status. Remember when I talked about they need to give an update on the base unit shipping production status? This is interesting. Over the past year, production has faced some well-known challenges. To address this, we've almost completely re-engineered the Polymega base unit with new, upgraded hardware that is several times more powerful than the original PM1, which is the version I have. The new Polymega features more CPU cores, higher clock speeds, double the RAM, increased internal storage, and quieter operation. In the short term, the biggest benefit will be significantly improved N64 performance. I've heard in the past that some of the N64 games don't run the greatest on the Ultra module, but I guess that's what you get with hardware emulation. Existing pre-orders will automatically upgrade it to the new system for free. No action was required. I mean, how awesome is that? Like, you don't have to redo the pre-order. So especially if you've been waiting for 2 years, you're kind of getting rewarded a little bit now. More hardware details are inbound, and we appreciate your patience. Gotta be so Dreamcast, please with this new upgrade. For those interested in upgrading to one of those new systems, we plan to reopen pre-orders for the new base unit in the early summer. I'm getting on that. I think I'm going to get on that. So yeah. Now for the bigger news. To me, I thought this was big news. Over the past few months, we've been putting the finishing touches on a Polymega app and Remix, first announced here a while back. Remember when I talked about MIA about a Polymega app? We're excited to share that Remix has now completed mass production and is on its way to our facilities from a factory overseas. What's Polymega Remix, you say? If you're a retro game collector with a compatible PC or handheld device, Remix is designed for you. It allows you to preserve your physical game collection just like the Polymega base unit, but with more flexibility in how and where you play. With Remix, preservation and gameplay is powered by the free Polymega app, launching first on Windows 11 compatible devices. You simply connect Remix via USB to your device, launch the Polymega app, then insert CD games and cartridges via those element modules, and start digitizing your collection. Once you're finished, disconnect Remix, launch Polymega anytime to enjoy your games at home or on the go. If I'm understanding this, this is so you're plugging in almost like an external hard drive or something like that to the base unit, and you're installing the games almost directly onto the base unit. At least that's how I'm understanding it. Anyway, so the gaming and installation experience closely mirrors the premium Polymega console interface, including the legendary Polymega game database, which I talked about, all the virtual display modes, patch support, custom playlists, extended set game installations, the Polymega game support, and more. So at launch, you can play Polymega on Windows PC, laptops, PC gaming handhelds, Intel Macs, and more. We aim to bring more platforms like iOS, Android, and Apple Silicon through the coming months. Truly, though, the best part of Polymega Remix is the price. At just $199 US, it's the most affordable way ever to get into Polymega. So I gotta imagine it's its own proprietary. I wonder if it's its own proprietary system or a piece of hardware. I guess it's tough for me to understand this. Polymega Remix pre-orders open this Thursday, April 16th at 8 a.m. So probably at the time that you're listening to this. Orders will ship in May of 2026. Yes, you read that right. In chronological order. Polymega app will be available in May as a free download from polymega.com. Wow, what a bombshell. Also, for a limited time, get 30% off a WC02 universal wireless controller with purchase of a Polymega Remix using the following code at checkout with both items in the cart. And that code is RMXWC02. For Japanese customers, pre-orders can be placed with a local shipping and service from World Game Express. Pre-orders placed through them will also ship in May 2026. I mean, what an update. This is the whole thing. Especially the upgrades, the base unit module that they're planning. I mean, like I said earlier, I think I'm going to jump on this one. The Polymega Remix update was something I put out of my brain a while back, especially since the episode, obviously the episode that I recorded mentioned the Polymega app that was missing in action. And the fact that you can now take your games you installed onto your Polymega and just transfer them to a PC, handheld, and more is quite exciting. It makes emulating retro games on your PC a little less sketchy. So you don't have, especially if you're trying to transfer physical copies, to be able to play onto your PC, that now the Polymega can be used as a medium to do that. Like I said in the episode, when they drop news hard. So I recommend staying on the website and checking in on when pre-orders for the base unit go back up, and watch out for this remix module that they plan on releasing as of listening to this episode. So like I said, the pre-orders should be up as you're listening to this, and hopefully I get one in my hands by May, and of course I'll talk more about it as I get to it and talk about, how well it works and everything. So, yeah, with all that said, thanks for listening, guys. Take it easy.